Time marches forward without permission. It doesn't pause for red lights, devastating headlines, or Maya Wilson as she navigated the cracked sidewalk in her wheelchair. Its left while producing a persistent squeak that had become her unwanted soundtrack. That sound was as intimate to her now as her own breathing, a relentless, embarrassing reminder of the life she'd been forced to accept 2 years ago, a reality she was still struggling to master. Maya's entire existence had shrunk to a fraction of what it once was. Beacon Heights University, which she'd once viewed as an endless playground of potential, late-night cramming sessions, spontaneous parties, the electrifying uncertainty of being 18 and invincible, had transformed into an obstacle course of impossible challenges. Every fractured piece of concrete became a treacherous terrain. The 3 modest steps ascending to the campus library might as well have been Mount Everest. Her days were now calculated in accessibility ramps, doorway measurements, and the uncomfortable stares or deliberate avoidance from people who used to be her friends. Right now, her immediate problem was brutally simple: she'd run out of fuel. Her specially adapted van, that reluctant symbol of her independence, sat stranded with an empty tank roughly a mile from campus, forcing her to make this dangerous trek to the closest gas station along a route never intended for someone in her situation. Her hands, muscular and calloused from the constant motion of self-propulsion, throbbed with fatigue. Fresh white gauze encircled her knee, evidence of a nasty fall from earlier that week when her wheel had snagged on broken pavement. A deep purple bruise spread across her thigh, concealed beneath denim. But her most revealing wound wasn't something you could see on her skin. It was the strip of medical tape stretched across her lips. This was her desperate, silent strategy. When the overwhelming noise of existence became unbearable, when the crushing anxiety felt like a scream clawing its way up from her chest, the physical pressure of that tape served as an anchor, a method to contain the internal storm. To any observer, it would appear disturbing, even alarming. To Maya, it was survival. The gas station emerged like an oasis of harsh white light against the encroaching darkness of this Tuesday evening. It was a way station for transients, for people simply moving from point A to point B. Maya felt that sense of invisibility acutely as she steered her chair toward the air and water pumps, desperately needing a moment to gather herself before tackling the complicated task of filling a portable gas container. She was just another girl in a wheelchair, part of the background scenery, unseen until she caught the attention of exactly the wrong person. The aggressive growl of a modified engine, all excessive horsepower and misplaced testosterone, shattered the mundane atmosphere. A gleaming black Mustang careened into the opposite pump lane, bass-heavy music rattling from its speakers. The driver's door flew open, and Kyle Brennan emerged like a storm cloud. He was Beacon Heights aristocracy, or at least that's how he saw himself. His varsity jacket, an obnoxious combination of blue and yellow with an embroidered B stitched proudly across the chest, served as his armor of privilege. He was the star wide receiver, someone whose existence seemed like an unending celebration of victories. His smile was a calculated weapon, his charisma a form of social currency. But at this particular moment, his expression radiated nothing but volcanic rage. He'd just received a devastating text message: he was being benched for the crucial rivalry game. A minor injury, the coach had explained, just a precautionary measure. To Kyle, it felt like a public assassination of his identity. He slammed his car door with such violence the entire vehicle shuddered. He kicked an abandoned plastic bottle, watching it skitter wildly across the pavement. His eyes, desperate and hunting for something to absorb his fury, locked onto Maya. He registered the wheelchair. He noticed the tape covering her mouth. He recognized a target that couldn't retaliate, a silent vessel for all his entitled privilege and impotent anger. Before we continue with what happens next, if stories about underdogs fighting back and unexpected heroes appearing when hope seems lost resonate with you, hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community that lives for these powerful moments, and something tells me you belong here. Now, let's see what happens when a bully meets his match, ***. What the hell are you staring at? He snarled, stomping aggressively toward her. Maya recoiled, her eyes expanding with fear above the tape. She attempted to maneuver her chair to create distance, but his speed overwhelmed her. He positioned himself directly in her path, blocking any escape. "You think this is amusing?" he spat, his voice saturated with poison. "Sitting there all silent and superior? You judging me?" He leaned closer, his face invading her personal space. The overpowering smell of discount cologne mixed with raw aggression made her want to gag. "You don't understand anything about me. You have no idea what I'm dealing with." Maya shook her head frantically, a desperate, panicked gesture. Her hands rose in a peaceful, placating motion, but this only intensified his rage. He interpreted it as condescension, as pity. "Don't you dare shake your head at me," he shouted, and with a sudden vicious movement, he swung his arm, striking the portable gas can from its holder on her chair. It crashed to the asphalt, rolling away with a hollow metallic sound. A muffled noise escaped from behind Maya's tape, a whimper of pure terror, of complete helplessness. Tears began forming in her eyes. This, inexplicably, was Kyle's breaking point. The sight of her vulnerability, her tears streaming down her face, triggered something dark within him. It was like waving a red flag before an enraged bull. "You think crying will save you?" he mocked, his voice dripping with cruel amusement. "You're invisible. You're a nobody trapped in that chair. The world doesn't give a damn about your tears." He advanced another step, his gaze fixating on her bandaged knee. A twisted, ugly smile contorted his features. "Let me give you something real to cry about." He pulled back his leg, his entire body coiling with the clear intention of driving his foot straight into her already damaged knee. Time seemed to distort for Maya. The fluorescent lights buzzed like furious wasps overhead. She could distinguish every detail: the filthy tread on the bottom of his expensive sneakers, the pure, undiluted malice burning in his eyes. This was the moment. This was when the world, which had already stolen so much from her, would take just a little bit more. She squeezed her eyes shut tight, bracing herself for the explosion of pain that was coming. But the impact never arrived. Instead, a completely new sound flooded the gas station, a sound so profound and commanding it seemed to reverberate through the very foundation of the earth. It began as a distant, low rumble, like approaching thunder rolling across distant mountains. Then it intensified, building upon itself, becoming a symphony of roaring engines and the distinctive percussive rhythm of large V-twin motorcycles. This wasn't a single bike. It wasn't even a handful. It was a mechanical avalanche of chrome and leather pouring into the gas station from both entrance points, surrounding the fuel pumps in a wide, rumbling circle of intimidating presence. Kyle froze mid-kick, his foot still suspended in the air. His expression of burning rage melted instantly into stunned confusion, then rapidly evolved into genuine terror. The intended kick was completely forgotten. Maya's eyes fluttered open cautiously. What confronted her defied comprehension. 40 motorcycles, perhaps even more, their riders embodying pure, untamed American spirit. They wore leather vests decorated with a single stark patch, a skull wearing a knight's helmet with "Road Guardians" arched above it and "Nomades" beneath. These weren't casual weekend enthusiasts on pristine Harley-Davidsons. These were men and women whose weathered faces told stories of thousands of miles on open highways. They were grizzled, heavily tattooed, and they had just completely encircled both Kyle and Maya in a ring of steel and leather. The engines cut off sequentially, one by one. The sudden silence that followed was somehow more deafening than the thunderous roar had been. In that profound quiet, the leader dismounted his bike. He was an absolute mountain of a man, his thick beard streaked with distinguished gray. His eyes remained hidden behind mirrored aviator sunglasses despite the fading evening light. His vest was completely covered in pins and patches, a wearable tapestry documenting a life lived entirely on society's edges. He didn't speak initially. He simply began walking deliberately toward Kyle, his heavy boots producing soft crunching sounds against the gravel-scattered asphalt. Kyle finally lowered his suspended foot, his earlier bravado evaporating completely. He suddenly looked like a terrified child caught in the act of something terrible. "Hey, man, we're cool," he stammered, retreating a step. "This is just a misunderstanding." The massive biker, whose road name was Jax, completely ignored him. He walked past Kyle as if he were nothing more than discarded trash on the sidewalk and proceeded directly to Maya. He knelt down in front of her wheelchair, his knees cracking audibly with the motion. Despite his enormous, intimidating physical presence, his posture conveyed pure deference and respect. He slowly, carefully extended one hand, his fingers thick and heavily calloused, and gently peeled the medical tape from her mouth. "It's okay, darling," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that somehow carried profound comfort. "You're completely safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you." He looked directly at her, truly seeing her, and in his eyes she didn't detect pity. Instead, she saw a fierce, protective fire burning. He glanced briefly at her bandaged knee, then returned his gaze to her face. "Did he touch you?" Maya, her breathing coming in ragged, uneven gasps, managed a small, shaky nod. With a trembling finger, she pointed at the gas can lying on the ground. He knocked that down. And he was going to." Jax didn't need to hear the rest. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod, a silent promise. He stood to his full imposing height, seeming to block out the remaining daylight. He turned to face Kyle, and the temperature around them seemed to plummet 10 degrees. The other road guardians, without receiving any verbal command, took a synchronized step forward, tightening their circle around Kyle like a noose. "You," Jack said, that single word dripping with barely controlled menace. "You like picking on people who can't defend themselves?" Kyle was visibly trembling now. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? It was a mistake. I'll pay for her gas. I'll buy her a new can." Jax took another measured step closer. "You think this is about a gas can?" He gestured toward Maya without breaking eye contact with Kyle. "You see that girl? You see the tape that was on her mouth? You know why it was there?" Kyle just shook his head, rendered mute by absolute terror. "I don't either," Jack said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "But I know it wasn't there to give you an excuse to torment her. I know that a real man, an actual man, protects those who can't protect themselves. He doesn't prey on the vulnerable." He looked Kyle up and down with obvious contempt, his gaze lingering on the varsity jacket. "Beacon Heights. Big man on campus, right? I bet you're a real hero to all your little friends." One of the other bikers, a woman with a completely shaved head and intricate tattoos snaking up her neck, spoke up. "We witnessed the entire thing, Jax. Saw him posturing like a peacock. Saw him preparing to kick her." Jax's jaw tightened visibly. He moved with startling speed, a blur of motion. He grabbed the front of Kyle's varsity jacket, his fist closing around the embroidered B, and lifted him completely off his feet as if he weighed nothing. "This jacket," Jax growled, his face inches from Kyle's terrified expression. "It's supposed to represent something meaningful. It's supposed to symbolize honor, teamwork, excellence. You've completely disgraced it. You've disgraced yourself." He released Kyle abruptly, who stumbled backward and fell hard onto the asphalt. The circle of bikers closed in tighter, their expressions grim and unforgiving. This was the moment of reckoning. The instant you've been waiting for, when the bully finally gets what's coming to him. But let me pose a question to you. While we're all anticipating that inevitable consequence, what would you be doing if you were physically present right now? Would you be recording everything on your phone? Would you be cheering for justice? Or would you be feeling that cold knot of fear forming in your own stomach, suddenly realizing how drastically a life can transform in a gas station parking lot on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Kyle scrambled backward like a crab, his eyes darting frantically around the ring of implacable, unforgiving faces. He was openly sobbing now, drowning in pure, undiluted fear. "Please don't hurt me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Jax looked back at Maya. The decision, his entire posture communicated, was entirely hers. This was her justice to determine and dispense. Maya studied the crumpled, weeping form of Kyle Brennan, the boy who had come to represent everything that had gone catastrophically wrong in her transformed life. The casual cruelty, the complete indifference, the total loss of control. She saw the absolute terror in his eyes, the identical terror she had experienced just minutes earlier. And she understood, with sudden, profound clarity, that she was nothing like him. Her power, her strength, would not be derived from his suffering. She shook her head firmly. "No," she whispered, her voice gradually gaining strength. "Don't. It's not what we do." A look of immense, genuine respect crossed Jax's weathered face. He nodded solemnly. "You heard her," he announced to his assembled crew. "We're not going to touch him." A collective, almost disappointed sigh rippled through the group. Jax leaned down, positioning his face mere inches from Kyle's terror-stricken expression. "But you listen very carefully to me, you privileged little punk. You're going to stand up. You're going to retrieve that gas can. You're going to fill it with premium fuel. Then you're going to pay for every drop. And then you're going to climb into your pathetic car and drive away from here. And if you ever, and I mean ever, come near this girl again, or even look at someone with a disability the wrong way, we will find out. And the road guardians have an exceptionally long memory. Do you understand me?" Kyle nodded frantically, tears and mucus streaking his face grotesquely. "Yes. Yes, I understand completely." "Now," Jax commanded. "Get to work." They all watched as Kyle, his hands shaking so violently he could barely maintain his grip on the fuel nozzle, filled the gas can. He paid at the pump with fumbling, trembling fingers, then scurried back to his car, refusing to make eye contact with anyone present. The Mustang peeled out of the gas station, its earlier aggressive roar now sounding feeble and pathetic, the sound of a defeated predator retreating. The oppressive tension shattered. The bikers relaxed their intimidating formation. Jax turned back to Maya with a completely different expression. "Where's your vehicle, sweetheart?" "About a mile down the road," she explained. "My van ran completely out of gas." Jax smiled for the first time, a genuine, crinkle-eyed smile that completely transformed his entire intimidating appearance. "Well then," he said warmly. "I guess you need a proper escort." What happened next was something Maya would replay in her mind for the remainder of her life, a memory she would treasure in her darkest moments. The 40 road guardians, with Jax positioned in the lead, formed a protective flanking formation around her wheelchair. They rode at a careful walking pace, their powerful engines purring softly like contented lions, creating a moving corridor of protection as she pushed her way down the shoulder of the road. It was a procession of honor, a parade befitting royalty. They accompanied her all the way to her stranded van, where Jax himself, demonstrating surprising mechanical aptitude, carefully siphoned the gas from the portable can into her fuel tank. As he worked, he talked, his voice carrying a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "The road guardians aren't what most people assume," he said, not looking directly at her, focused on his task. "A lot of us are military veterans. Some of us have lost people we love. We've experienced what it's like to be at absolute rock bottom. We look out for our own kind." He finished screwing the gas cap back on and turned to face her. "And tonight, you became one of our own." He reached into his vest and retrieved a small embroidered patch. It was a miniature version of their knight's helmet's skull insignia. "You ever need anything at all, you display this in your window." Any one of us, anywhere in this entire country, sees that patch and will stop immediately. No questions asked. You have my word. Maya accepted the patch, her fingers closing around the rough, worn fabric. It felt like a talisman, a key granting access to a secret, powerful world she never knew existed. She looked at the 40 assembled bikers, these rugged, widely misunderstood angels who had descended upon her absolute darkest moment and illuminated it with a ferocious, unwavering light of protection and dignity. "Thank you," she said, though the words felt utterly inadequate for what she was experiencing. Jack simply winked. "Take care of yourself, Maya." He knew her name. She couldn't recall ever telling him. They mounted their bikes in unison, and with a synchronized roar that had transformed from a sound of threat into a symphony of comfort and protection, they disappeared into the gathering night, leaving Maya alone with the humming engine of her van and the profound, life-altering silence that follows a genuine miracle. But the story doesn't end there, not even close. Kyle Brennan was eventually identified through official channels. The gas station had comprehensive security cameras. The video footage, even without capturing audio, was absolutely damning evidence of his actions. He was expelled from Beacon Heights University. His promising football career evaporated before it ever truly began. The story exploded across local news, then gained national attention. The gas station miracle, they called it in headlines. But Maya never granted interviews. She kept her savior's identities protected, preserving the mystique of the road guardians. She kept the patch, naturally, sewing it carefully onto an old denim jacket she wore on particularly difficult days. It served as a constant reminder that courage manifests in countless forms. Sometimes it arrives as the roar of 40 engines, and sometimes it exists in a single, quiet word of mercy. She continued her education, ultimately finishing her degree and becoming a passionate, vocal advocate for disability rights and comprehensive anti-bullying campaigns. Her life, once narrowly defined by physical limitation, became defined instead by purpose, a purpose forged in fire and steel on that random Tuesday evening. But the most profound chapter of this interconnected story was yet to be written, unfolding not in a single dramatic confrontation, but in the quiet, steady progression of the years that followed. It began with a letter, postmarked from a small town in Oregon, arriving in a plain manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a faded, well-worn photograph of a young man in army uniform, his expression serious and determined. The letter was from Kyle's mother. She wrote of a son who had been broken, not inherently evil, a boy who had been consumed by crushing pressure to perform, pressure that she herself had contributed to creating. She wrote of a young man who was now desperately, genuinely trying to rebuild himself from the foundation up. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She explicitly stated she had no right to request such grace. But she thanked Maya. She explained that the public humiliation and the loss of his scholarship had created a rock bottom that forced Kyle to confront the person he had become with brutal honesty. He had enlisted in the army, and after surviving a grueling period of basic training, had discovered a sense of purpose and discipline that his previously privileged life had never required or afforded him. He was currently stationed overseas, and in his letters home, he spoke of the gas station incident not with bitterness or resentment, but as the pivotal, transformative moment that had shattered his distorted worldview completely. He had, his mother wrote with obvious pride, saved a young girl from a collapsed building in an active conflict zone, carrying her to safety while under direct fire. When asked by his commanding officer why he had risked his life, he simply responded, "It was time to start protecting people instead of hurting them." This letter sparked something fundamental in Maya, a realization that her story and Kyle's had become forever intertwined in an ongoing cycle of cause and effect that was still spinning outward, still creating ripples. A year later, she received an invitation to speak at a prestigious national conference on restorative justice. As she wheeled herself onto the vast stage, the warm lights illuminating her face and the sea of faces before her, she told her complete story, not just the dramatic part about the bikers, but all of it. She spoke candidly about her accident, the depression that followed, the tape on her mouth, the absolute terror at the gas station, and the unexpected letter from a grieving mother in Oregon. She spoke about the different manifestations of strength, the protective strength of the road guardians, the moral strength she found within herself to show mercy, and the tremendous strength it required for Kyle to genuinely transform himself. As she concluded her presentation, a man stood up in the very back of the enormous auditorium. He was tall, with a soldier's rigid posture, his hair cut military short. It was Kyle. He had secured leave specifically to be present for this moment. He didn't approach the stage. He didn't seek attention or absolution. He simply stood there, his hands clasped respectfully in front of him, and gave her a slow, deep nod, a perfect mirror of the nod Jax had given her years earlier. It was an acknowledgement, a gesture of profound respect, a closing of the circle that had connected them. No words were exchanged between them that day, but none were necessary. The story had written them both, and in doing so, had completely rewritten the trajectory of both their lives. Maya learned that the world may not stop spinning for you, may not pause to accommodate your pain or your struggle. But sometimes, if you're incredibly fortunate, it sends you an entire cavalry of unexpected angels to help you get that world moving forward again. And sometimes the most powerful form of revenge isn't destruction at all, it's redemption. A story that began with a squeaking wheelchair and tape covering a mouth ended with the thunderous roar of freedom and the quiet, unshakable confidence of a young woman who discovered she was never truly alone. This story has touched countless people, and it's remarkable to consider how it's connected all of us in this digital community we're building together. It makes me genuinely curious, from which part of the country, or even the world, are you watching this right now? Share your location in the comments below. Let's see how far this story has traveled.